What's up, everybody? Montero here, and today I want to talk about what I think is the most overlooked maintenance item on your older 4x4 rigs. This is a 2003 Mistsubishi Montero, and this is a really common issue with this truck, which is why I'm so familiar with it, but it's a really common issue with any of your cars that are going to be getting into the 20, 30, or 40-year-old range that you're going to be off-roaded. So what I'm talking about today is suspension bushings. Everyone gets really excited about lift kits and coilovers and getting the car off the ground, bigger tires, and getting it out there. And people are really excited to change out their struts and their springs and all that stuff, but they don't have any time or attention for the bushings. Part of that is you're not thinking about bushings, you just don't see them. But the other part of it is they're really hard to work on. So you can see this one, they're press fit in here like most bushings are. So you got bushings, you also got ball joints. But I want to focus on these bushings because what ends up happening is as your suspension is cycling, you're putting tons of wear on these. And what can sometimes happen is people think because the car was daily driven or it wasn't off-roaded or it was in really good shape when they bought it, that it doesn't need the kind of time and attention down here. The reality is most of these are made of rubber, and so it doesn't really matter how much wear it's had. 20-year-old rubber is still going to be prone to cracks and deformation, and it could be that the first time you take it off-road, it totally shears it. I've lost some of that on my upper control arms. I've actually broken through a bushing, which screws up your alignment and all sorts of stuff. It also makes it ride like garbage. And so this is probably the most important item I think that gets overlooked is when you're doing all the suspension stuff, those bushings, these ones are almost 20 years old and they've seen a better life. But here's another thing that's really interesting is when you lift this car, and I ran into this problem. When I lifted this car, I did just a spacer lift in the back and I got it all set up and I brought it in to get it aligned. And the guy said, we can't align it. Your rear wheels don't have any adjustment. And so if you look under here, this is an independent rear suspension. This applies for independent rear suspension, but it also applies for independent front suspension. You can see my alignment bolts. Those two bolts in the back, as well as the toe bolts that are a little more further forward, were totally seized. So what ends up happening? Rust, corrosion, all that stuff. Water gets in there over the years, and this alignment bolt seizes inside of this bushing. On this side, you can kind of see how that looks. And so you've got this metal sleeve that is then, it's formed, it's got some adhesive, it's basically glued to this bushing. And that metal sleeve doesn't rotate. Well, these bolts are supposed to pivot and work as eccentrics on that and allows you to align the car. So what ends up happening is you get all excited, you bought your older 4x4, you want to put a lift on it, you throw a lift on it, you go to get it aligned, sure enough, you can't align the vehicle. So now you've got your new tires on there, you get your new lift, and the wheels are all crooked and you'll wear out those tires significantly faster. It could be even undrivable. And so these bushings are important to address because one, they are a wear item, and two, they could really be a factor for alignment. Now, specifically, the Mistsubishi Montero really struggles with this. In the rear end, I've had to replace every single alignment bolt at least once. And this one, 3 out of the 4 of these lower cams are seized in the bushing. You can see I got this one out, but this one is totally stuck. I've hit it with an air hammer, I've hit it with a sledgehammer, trying to break this thing out. It's totally stuck in here. And so the best solution that I've come up with for getting these out is not a pretty one. Most shops are not going to want to touch this. They're not going to mess with it because they can't just pull this part out and replace it. They actually have to get in here and do something. And so I use these guys right here, the Milwaukee Torch, the carbide teeth. I buy the one for thick metal because these are hardened bolts. These are structural. I buy one of these per bolt, which seems really excessive, but trust me, this is a terrible job, and the more power you have to fight, the better. So what you're going to do is you're going to get your Sawzall, you're going to get in here and you're going to cut right on the inside of that. You're going to come over here and you're going to cut right on the inside of that. You want to be careful of your arm and that, but you're going to cut off this end, and that will allow this to come out. It is a pretty grueling process. It's pretty involved. You just have to cut them out of there, and then you have to press that bushing out or get a whole replacement arm. And so like I said, I've done this a handful of times using this technique. I don't know of another technique that really works. You could try to get an angle grinder in there, but then you really can risk damaging this subframe area or touching the arm. It's just a lot more risky than using this. And I've also used lesser Sawzall blades. This is the key. So this is how you get these out, at least on my Mitsubishi, and I've done this on a Subaru as well. You just cut there, and then you can pull that thing out. Unfortunately, that means you do have to get new alignment bolts, but that's the solution for stuck alignment bolts. So there you go, guys. There's what I think is the most overlooked item, both because they are a wear item and two, because it can prevent you from getting an alignment that could screw up your tires. It could screw up the way your car drives. And so this is something that definitely needs attention if you're working on an older vehicle that you plan on lifting and four-wheel driving. All right, so just got done cutting that bolt out that I was showing you guys. Ended up taking this blade, and I ended up doing something that I haven't done before because of the nature of it. You just had to reach out pretty far, and so I was using a lot of this tip. And so what I ended up doing is taking a grinder and cutting that off so that I could get to some new teeth. Because even just after doing one bolt, I had already worn out the teeth on this. These bolts are really, really tough. But as you can see, there it is. You got to cut through almost a solid inch, maybe a little more, of steel on each side to get that bolt out. You can see it's totally seized in there. There's no way it's coming out. And so I thought I'd take just this time to explain what I'm doing as a solution. Now, one thing you can do is you can cover these bolts in anti-seize. You can just take these and you can slather them in anti-seize, and that will help most of the time. I know there's some mixed opinions on anti-seize, but that should allow it to spin freely in the shaft. But if you can upgrade bushings. So what I've got here are some poly-tough bushings, and for the Montero here in America, I got these from Lusso Overland. These are poly-tough bushings, and what I love about these is, one, they're really hard. They're really like tough bushings, and so they'll put up with off-road abuse. But two, you can see this inner sheath is not actually attached, it's not affixed to the body of the bushing. And so what that does is it sits in there just like a normal bushing. You put your alignment bolt in just like in a normal thing. But if this ever seizes to that inner collar, it can still rotate freely, which means that on these cams, the eccentric will still move and you can still align your vehicle. So you'll still have to cut them out if it does seize in there, but you'll be able to align your vehicle. These poly-tough bushings should last probably the rest of the life of this car, depending on how hard I drive it. And so if this is a common problem on your vehicle, or if you have a Mistsubishi Montero, this is the way to go. These poly-tough bushings with this disconnected sheath, I don't know what to call it, tube, whatever, is for sure the way to go, because that allows, even if they all seize, it allows you to still get an alignment, which is a huge complaint for a lot of people. So anyways, that's how I'm fixing this solution. I've wrapped up this side. This new control arm is gonna go in with a fresh ball joint and all that, and then I'm gonna get to cutting the other side. But hopefully this helps you guys out, and you don't have the same issues, or if you do, now you know how to fix them.